we've talked a bit about some disruptive in a negative way impacts of technology, but we've also heard that technology can help us solve some of the very challenges we will have in the future of work. And so we have a feature in this year's forum where we're going to have 3 people. Some are tech visionaries, some educators, some working in communities, who are actually thinking about how they deploy technology and new institutional frameworks to help people connect to jobs. The very first of these spotlights is Henry Rock, and let me now welcome him to the stage.
Thank you. Real pleasure. Good morning. It is still morning, just about afternoon. My name is Henry Rock. I'm the Executive Director of City Startup Labs, and we're an Entrepreneurs Academy that is based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we have just wrapped up a pilot that we have done for the last couple of years with the Urban League of the Central Carolinas. Now, our focus is on teaching Black male millennials entrepreneurship. We're very intentional about that. We just, as I said, completed this pilot and are now moving on to UNCC, where we will be establishing a center of excellence and doing that in affiliation with Ventureprise there. So I was asked today to address this question, this essential question of how technology entrepreneurship affects the development of, or job creation, I should say, for minorities. And I'd like to really look at this question in 3 parts. First of all is job creation, preparation, and access. So when it comes to job creation, size doesn't matter as much as the age of a company. All right, the Kauffman Foundation states in a study that they've done that the real major emphasis on job growth has taken place in the public sector with those companies that have been 5 years or less. 5 years or less. And when we look at entrepreneurs and startups, they are really the drivers of this growth. Were it not for them, we would have had no net job growth in the U.S. economy. No net job growth. In addition to that, when you look at entrepreneurship and business churn, these are the things that really lead to innovation, productivity, and competition. And we have to look at this also from a public policy perspective, and that is, how do we encourage entrepreneurship, especially amongst minority entrepreneurs? Because they can be the drivers of job growth. I like to call it 21st century workforce development. Now, the next thing is preparation, job preparation. The Labor Department says that the next 7 to 10 fastest growing jobs over the next 10 years are going to be in the STEM fields, and that 16 of the 25 highest paying jobs are going to be requiring STEM preparation. And if you're a STEM worker, that you're going to be making 26% more than your non-STEM peers. Now, when it comes to African Americans, a great source for STEM talent is the historically Black colleges and universities and the outsized productivity that these represent. Now, these universities, by the way, 3% of total colleges and universities around the country, but they produce 40% of the STEM degrees, 60% of the engineering degrees earned by black college grads. But let's face it, it's really not just about diversity for diversity's sake. A McKinsey report says that those companies that are racially and ethnically diverse are 35% more likely to financially outperform their counterparts. So diversity, as I see it, can be a real competitive edge. And the interesting thing is that it doesn't have to be for corporate America, but for our local, regional economies and economic development, but also our national our national economic vitality. And the thing is, as I see it, is that we are not using our extraordinary and unique diversity to our global advantage. Now, the last thing, and perhaps the most troublesome thing, is access. There was a Atlantic Monthly poll that was done. And with a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being absolutely abysmal, Silicon Valley's racial diversity is a 7. A 7. All right? And when they look at the data, they see that the lack of black tech workers based on or relative to their percent of the population is even worse than women and Hispanics in the industry. And this I see as a fundamental issue that we have to deal with if we're going to have any hope of being able to change this problem. Because what is the underlying thing here? The context that makes this up, is our relationship as a country with our black citizenry, as I see it, both historically and also presently. It's this context that has black folks largely marginalized and looked as misfits, not being able to do one thing or the other, and largely on the sidelines, watching the entrepreneurial parade go by. So I suggest that what we ought to do is to come to real terms, to honest terms, speak forthrightly about the need for us to look at the insidious, implicit, in some cases explicit, biases that lead to what Dr. Eddie Gaud, who is the Princeton professor in his latest book, Democracy in Black, calls the value gap. I think we need to look at this value gap that has us perceiving others in a way that has them deemed less than they ought to be, less productive, less inclusive. So what I'd like to do before I sum this up, because I know I'm getting the hook here, what I like to do here, though, before I sum this up, is to say that as a recent article in the Bloomberg magazine had suggested, and that was that instead of us thinking in terms of entrepreneurship from the point of view of how we can hire a new tech or make a new tech diverse workforce, why don't we think in terms of how we can increase diversity on the part of those who are starting companies? And that's really what we're up to here at City Startup Labs, right? And lastly, I'd like to say this, and that is that according to the Misfit Economy, it's a recent book published, according to that Misfit Economy, those of us who are in the midst of seeing business churn and economic churn, what we need to consider is that it is the misfits, like the guys that I'm working with, who can actually be the difference in terms of economic prosperity and economic stagnation. I really do want to thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.